Hello there and welcome back to the channel. In today's episode we're going to be exploring one of the most brutal and destructive handheld weapons ever produced. A weapon considered so malicious, so bad, so cruel that it was actually banned in the Federation. Unusually for just a standard directed energy weapon. This wasn't a weapon of mass destruction, it wasn't capable of wiping out whole cities in a single blast, it couldn't crack a planet, it didn't exterminate all life. It was simply a hand weapon that was considered too cruel to ever be used, and that is the Varon T Disruptor. Before we get started, please like, share, subscribe, comment down below your thoughts on this weapon and whether or not you really think it should have been banned, and also who do you think made it, which is what I'm going to speculate on at the end of this particular little bit of exploration. But first, what do we know about the Varon T Disruptor? It was a handheld weapon. Obviously it was a disruptor. It had a curved design and was designed to fit neatly into the palm of a bipedal humanoid species such as a human or as a Balian, such as Kivas Fajo, who is known to own 4 of the 5 Varon T Disruptors ever produced, noting that he slept with one under his pillow because it made him feel safe, although this could have been hyperbole. It's not entirely clear, but I bet he did sleep with that thing under his pillow. He used the weapon only once to kill someone that we know of, when he killed a member of his crew called Vario when she attempted to help Data escape. Fajo was a collector, as they were known. Basically a person that likes to, literally in the name, collect things. These are people that are the 24th century equivalent of stamp collectors. They just happen to collect more rare and exotic items. They're generally rich and they hail from different species. They're hardly an organization, they're just people. One of his things was to collect unusual items such as the Varon T Disruptor. As in its name, this weapon, despite being a direct energy weapon, it emitted a blue, sort of fuzzy beam of energy and was a disruptor type weapon. The reason it got itself banned was because it was a very painful and slow death. Unlike a phaser, which instantly vaporizes the body, this particular weapon destroyed you from the inside out. It literally blew you apart atom by atom, and it was relatively slow, and depending on where it hit you, it could be very painful and what potentially agonizing for a person before it eventually destroyed them wholly or knocked out their brain. Because as we saw, this thing hitting someone in the chest, it took several seconds to fully disintegrate an adult humanoid female while she screamed in pain. A horrific weapon which got banned for very good reasons, for its unusually cruel and unnecessarily brutal way of killing. It's not certain if the weapon could do other things, but in terms of basic design, in appearance, it had a curved handle, it had a metallic chrome-like emitter and other cylindrical parts on the main barrel of the weapon. Unusually for a weapon of this type in the Alpha Quadrant, its firing mechanism was a button on the back of the weapon rather than a trigger mechanism, which was more standard. This is very similar to a Kazon Disruptor we see utilized in the Delta Quadrant, although it is relatively rare in the Alpha Quadrant. It should also be sort of pointed out that this is also similar to a Starfleet hand phaser, and although the hand phaser was more elongated and less curved by the 24th century, it still fired from a button rather than a trigger mechanism. The only other example of these weapons being seen to be used was actually owned by a human woman called Kelsey, who was actually a mercenary, and it was apparently destroyed when her ship was destroyed in 2369. The other 4 examples were likely confiscated by Federation authorities when Fajo was arrested for murder and kidnapping and whatever other charges I'm sure they could levy at him, probably a few theft charges in there as well. That's about it. Other than that, it was a relatively standard weapon. The only problem with this weapon was it's not what it did, just how it did it. The, again, unnecessarily cruel and barbaric way that it ended its target's life. But I'm going to get now to my speculation about who actually made the Varon T Disruptor. It's not obvious from the name. Varon T, that could just be the Federation's classification. It could have been what it was actually named. But I think there's a different bit of information that indicates the origins of this weapon. Maybe not to a specific species, but I think the fact that this weapon is banned in the Federation is not in and of itself remarkable until you learn that only 5 were ever produced. That means these were effectively prototypes, and they did not continue to be produced. Now, if, say, the Ferengi had made them, they wouldn't have stopped making them just because they were banned for use and production and sale within the Federation. Klingons might still buy them, Cardassians, the Maquis, you name it. There are literally thousands of other races that could have potentially been good markets, not to mention other Ferengi. So, I think this was a Federation weapon. The Federation have been known to, on occasion, in limited numbers, utilize disruptor weapons. They don't exclusively and only dogmatically use phasers, they just prefer them because they're more versatile. But the Federation does have disruptors and will utilize them on occasion. So I think this was a Federation weapon. I think someone in the Federation, perhaps not in Starfleet, but because I think if it was Starfleet, it would have simply been produced. I think it was manufactured by some company or individual within the Federation, presented during testing. They determined this thing was far too dangerous, far too brutal, and was just unnecessarily cruel to ever use it, so it was instantly banned, and whoever made them simply stopped making them. How they fell into the hands of a collector? Well, how does anything fall into anybody's hands? Money. Credits. Gold, pressed latinum, cold, hard cash. That's very likely the reason. They might not have been able to make more of them, but they could sell the 5 that they had. And that's practically all we know about the Varon T Disruptor. The only other time we saw one attempted to be used was when Data, and yes, he did fire it. The weapon was in a state of discharge while he was transported off of Phaedo's ship. He was going to kill Phaedo with this weapon after Phaedo had basically admitted he's got to carry on killing people. Data deduced that it was better to kill him than allow him to live. Data, of course, generally default's position is he doesn't like to kill. No one does. Well, not good people anyway, but he was going to. That's the only other time we really see it going to be used. Similarly designed weapons have been seen at other times, utilized by other individuals on occasion, but these weapons have been actually identified as phasers. Now, it's likely that someone simply took the casing design of the Varon T Disruptor and swapped out the internal mechanisms and power source and turned it into another weapon, but the casing in and of itself was perfectly viable, just the weapon itself was not. That's most likely the reason why other variants, shall we say, of this weapon have been seen. Utilized by human colonists on Dorvan 5. They've also been seen to be utilized by the Ferengi and others. So it's clearly a design that worked. It's just the actual base technology of the Varon T Disruptor in and of itself was banned. It's like they swapped out the ammunition, basically. But that's what we know. And what do you think about my speculation? Do you think this was a Federation weapon after all, and it was banned? It does make the most sense. I mean, there've got to be millions of different types of weapons. Sure, maybe the Federation finds out about them, but how do they enforce that over a society or people that they're not in control over? It has to have been domestically produced, in my opinion, within the Federation's borders in order to get itself banned so early in its production. And again, we've seen similar weapons used by humans within the Federation, but those happen to be phasers, not disruptors. But let me know in the comment section below what you think. And we're now at the end of this video. If you did enjoy it, please hit the like button, hit the bell icon if you want to stay notified to other videos on this channel, and also a slight apology for the long period between uploads. I did recently have some bad news in my family, which has forced me to take a small break from everything. So, getting back into it now. But here we go, that's the Varon T Disruptor. You know, giving this a bit of a rewatch for primetime 1980s television, this is a pretty damn brutal scene.